Hello, I'm Derek Arden and welcome to Monday Night Live. Today I'm going to talk about neuro-linguistic programming. When I left Barclays, I went to Harvard Business School, then I studied NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, the way the brain works, the language patterns that we use and the programming, because that's what high achievers appeared to be using. And I studied Tony Robbins, I studied Richard Bandler, and I studied Michael Breen. So I'm going to walk you through some of the issues that I have found particularly helpful when I've been coaching and mentoring people on negotiation, communication skills, sales, and influencing. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen now, and we hope that everything will work this time perfectly. So, right. So, slide number one is the of definition of NLP, which you might just be able to see on this change slide, the art and science of personal excellence, or a user manual for the brain. Why have I put the number 17 up? I'm a great fan of 17 minutes meetings, 17 minutes between breaks, and the fact 17 minutes is an odd number. It's a number that can't be divided. So it's a pattern interrupt. And in a minute, I'm going to talk about psychology and pattern interrupts when people get into hypnotic trances, which we all do from time to time. So my agenda today, or as my friend and mentor Patricia Fripp says, don't have an agenda. Say today we're going to discuss, or today we're going to learn. So the agenda today that I'm going to talk about within NLP is modeling, managing your state, building rapport, listening acutely, reading body language, the words you use and the language. And one of my favorites when I'm helping people negotiate, which is pattern interrupt. So the first one is modeling high achievers. That's what NLP is all about. And someone like Andy Halliday, who's on today, who's been the England hockey coach, what does he do when he coaches people? Look at the very best in the world at hockey, the Indian team. What do they do so successfully? What do the elite footballers, the elite baseball players do mentally in their minds, how they handle things, etc.? Because if we do what they do, or we attempt to do what they do, and we practice what they do, then perhaps we might be able to do it. So, modeling, learning from excellence, observing people who get outstanding results, incorporating their mindset, their language patterns, their body language, their strategies. And in negotiation, my expertise, modeling excellence, accelerates the skill by studying the expert negotiators, speakers, and expert communicators. So the number 2 point is state, managing your own state. Are you in the right state, or are you in a right state? Are you in the right frame of mind to go into that negotiation, to go into that presentation, to go into that important meeting? Have you got there early enough? Have you been, my computer's obviously got a mind of its own here. Are you helping other people with their state? Because in the UK and in lots of wealthy countries around the world, people go around moaning and groaning. The news is negative. They get their state off of watching too much news, negative programs. How are you helping others that aren't in that right state to actually achieve, as Tim Durkin would call, the goals and what you want to accomplish? So number 3 is rapport. Building rapport. Where's the other person coming from? How are you connecting with the other people? What techniques are you using to actually build rapport? Well, let's talk about 5. Let's talk about number 1, small talk. They say that we should have up to about 5 minutes small talk for every hour of meetings. Yeah, I see so many people get to meetings and start straight away, or alternative, they get there late. As I say to people, don't be on time, be early so you get yourself in the right frame of mind and into the right state. And then they don't necessarily mirror match the other person, putting themselves into the other person's world. Where are they coming from? Mirroring and matching their body language, matching as much as you can the type of person they are and how they come across, connecting with their world, putting yourself in their position, which is why I always like the radio station W11 FM, which, as you know, stands for What's in It for Me. And then we talked recently about building rapport on an email. And if the person sends me an email which says, Dear Derek, of course I reply to them, Dear Martin. And if they put best wishes, I reply, best wishes. I have to tell you that somebody out of the blue has asked me to do a talk in the city for nothing. I'm not even sure if I'm going to get expenses, but there are going to be 30 people there, so I'm considering doing it. But in the confirmation email, they didn't even write Dear Derek. So I'm going to go back to them and ask them if it was actually for me in a very nice way. So we can clearly build rapport quite easily by using some of these skills. Some of these skills, ladies and gentlemen, that I notice very often many people don't use. Number 4 is listening acutely. They say that most people need a good listening to, and yet that phrase is, we say most people need a good talking to. And if you look at those, the first 6 letters of the word listen, Listen, that's an anagram of the word silent. And that means being silent in your mind, silent with your mouth, so that you can really listen to what people are saying. Most people don't listen. They're thinking about what they're going to talk, what they're going to say next. And that's one of the things I really learned out of my NLP training, to be totally focused, 100% present and listening to what people were saying, how they were saying it. So listen with your ears and in your eyes. You've got 4 bits of kit to listen with. As I say to everybody, a lot of people say it's just 2. No, it isn't. It's 4, because we want to see how the body language is reacting. Active, disciplined listening. You know, I test people when when I'm having fun at a conference, and I say, how many animals of each species did Moses take into the ark? And can you believe most people think the answers to that is 2? You've heard me say this before, and I can see from your body language that some people still think the answer is 2. I don't think Moses had an aunt, did he? I think it was Noah. But if people weren't listening clearly to what I was saying, then they may have made a mistake. And that's a bit of fun, but it just shows you how people do not listen. Listen to what's, I mean, I say my normal price is X, so I can start up high. And people don't usually hear the normal price or the usual price, etc. So what is said, how it's said, and clearly what is not said. And I've been looking at 1 or 2 of these political interviews recently. There's one particularly woman that went on a BBC program yesterday, and I think probably made a bit of a fool of herself, because she didn't really answer the questions, and she dodged about, and she'd probably be in a bit of trouble with the police over it, I would think. So who knows? And then we come to body language. And of course, those of you who know me know that I've written a book on body language, a bit of fun, the secret language of success. And the reason I did that was because when I started teaching negotiation and studying it, I noticed that body language was very important. And people were saying, oh, yeah, that's definitely the truth, Derek. And then they started rubbing their nose. And I thought, that's funny. Pinocchio's nose grew every time he told a lie. And does that go back 500 years? Yes, it does. And you know why? Because we get a little tingling feeling round here when we're uncomfortable with what we are saying. And these issues are intuitive. And as my friend Andy Halliday says, you know, he's got a copper's nose. He could spot people were spinning it. I can spot people spinning it, but most people don't watch, they don't look, they don't see. And so, you know, if I did a few quick body language takes, what does that mean? Well, if people are doing that, generally it means they're looking for some divine help, whatever their religion is, as opposed to doing that, which if you're playing poker with somebody and they're doing that's a very confident gesture as they put their hands together, folding their arms as you ask them a difficult question, very defensive, moving forward, close the sale quickly. Very important body language. And as I said, it's 5 times more difficult to lie with body language than it is with the words, unless you're a professional liar. And there's a few professional liars about in the political world all over the world. So, and watching some of the really good operators on body language, like Trump, like Tony Blair, then you can learn a lot by the way they come across and handle it. Silent signals of success, reading body language. But a lot of people don't think about managing their own body language, how you look, how you dress, how you come across, how interested you look. Because if you're in a meeting and someone's not listening, you can clearly see that straight away. And how are they going to get respect if they haven't been listening to you? And the same applies to you, and you see people in meetings like this, I'm bored. By the way, the degree of boredom depends on the angle of your head on your palm. So again, managing your own body language, how you're coming across with that state, etc. Then we come on to language. Well, we've had our friend Tracy Hooper on here a number of times, and I'm going to get her back in the autumn. She talks about words to use and words to lose. You affect people with the language that you use. In my influencing chapter in Win-Win, I put on page 194 some really positive words in. And the editor said, what's this got to do with a book on negotiating? I said, it's got a lot to do because people are inspired, people are influenced, people are keener to negotiate with people that they like, that transmit energy, that transmit enthusiasm. And so sometimes I think to myself, are you a drain or are you a radiator? Are you going to make a difference to the person that you're talking to? Because people like to deal with people who are enthusiastic and energetic. So many times people are in a negotiation situation and it's marginal. Who do you choose? Well, you're going to choose the person you like. And yet so many people don't get that. And finally, we come to pattern interrupt. That's a good pattern interrupt, isn't it? Some people might think that I got the colours wrong on the slide. Martin Cairns and I had some fun with pattern interrupt. Pattern interrupt is when you play around with words or issues where you actually make people stop and think. Tony Robbins says most people are in a hypnotic trance most of the time. And so bringing people out of a hypnotic trance, like when we're driving down the motorway 50 miles and we don't remember any road junctions we went past. But of course, if a blue light came on and you heard that birder coming on, suddenly you come present. And that's really a fantastic example of a pattern interrupt, doing something unexpected. When I was chairing the Professional Speaking Association, there were a number of people who actually didn't have any respect for the officials. And I was the chair. And I said to my daughter, who's done an NLP practitioner's certificate, what should I do about this? And she said, Dad, when they're doing that, why don't you just stand up, walk around the room and pour yourself a cup of coffee? So the next time they did that, I did. And it's interesting when you stand, as soon as you stand up and change your state and put yourself actually psychologically above the people, they go, oh, what's going on? In training, I know Nancy does this sort of thing as well. She does one day trainings like I do, or I used to. Go and open the window about 2:30 in the afternoon suddenly as people are in that sort of sleepy state after after, or call a break, go to the bathroom, stretch your back. Excuse me, I need to use the bathroom. Do something for effect. Now, Martin and I used to talk about this a lot. We ran 1 day courses for NatWest Bank. We trained 1,200 people in in a year, and they were sending 40 people at a time, and we had great fun. And Martin and I talked about how we could keep people awake in the afternoon. Well, we're pretty good at that, lots of energy. But one of the things we came up with was to put a pound coin under one chair in the room. And then at about 2:30, Martin would say, well, we're just going to have a quick break now. But what we're going to do, we're going to ask one person to come up and summarize the course so far and all the positive points of it. But he said, don't worry. That's using language to make them worry. There's no such thing as don't worry because you're using worry. It's a bit like saying to someone, don't think of a blue tree. You can't help thinking of a blue tree. So negatives don't work because people think of the positive or whatever you said first. And underneath your one person's chair, you're the person that's selected. Well, the problem is at that point, everybody used to pale up. Oh, no, not me. Oh, God, I'm going to have to summarize this. And there was one time when I was watching Martin doing this that I thought, no, we got to stop doing this because there's a danger someone's going to have a heart attack or a nervous breakdown while this is going on. So yeah, but in a negotiation, and I'm in a mediation on Wednesday with the guy who employs me to sit there and watch the body language and advise him. And we'll take a time out if things are getting a little bit, let's take a break. Let's take a time out. Let's come back and discuss it. We've made a lot of progress. Let's take a break for 5 minutes. What that pattern interrupt does, it de-emotionalizes it. It allows people to take stock and review where they are and de-emotionalize the situation. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been going on for 17 minutes. I'm going to stop the recording in a minute. We talked about modeling high achievers, putting yourself in the right state, building rapport with people before you try and influence them, listening acutely, reading body language, managing your own body language, the power of language, the power of words to inspire, motivate people, and using pattern interrupt underneath the scene. That's only about half of the areas we covered on my 20-day training on negotiation on NLP. When I was looking at NLP linked to negotiation and how we could put that into the work I do. 17 minutes, I think, is a good pattern interrupt. So I'm going to turn the slides off now and open it up to questions. But let's have a look. We've got a couple of master practitioners of NLP with us today. Shelley, are you there?
I am.
Shelley, have you got any stories or anything to throw into the pot while I have a glass of water?
Oh, no, lots of experts on here, so I wouldn't begin to sort of presume anything. What I would say is that I've found more latterly that I do a lot more work with values than I do with goals. I think often people become adrift with themselves because they're setting goals that don't really fit their values anymore.
What do you mean by that?
Well, let me see if I can think of an example. If, let's say, your higher value is authenticity. So if you set a goal for something that isn't really in a line with that, I want to make some money by writing a book. I don't think I'm not particularly interested in the topic, but I know I can make £1 million if I write this book. Well, if it doesn't feel authentic, it's going to be hard for you to do it. I mean, that's a bit extreme. You probably
Oh, that's a good example. Yeah.
But so I think I spend a lot of time helping people drill deep to get their, connect with their values so that their goals are in alignment. And then it makes goal setting almost doesn't need to be done because they're so motivated. It happens.
Sure.
That's the only thing I would add
Okay,
to
thank you.
your very eloquent presentation.
Well, that's very, very kind of you to say so, despite the fact I couldn't get the kit to work properly. Jill, are you there?
I
Jill,
know Tim and Jill and others know a lot more about NLP probably than me, but
well, you told me you had a practitioner's certificate in NLP, and
I've got something somewhere that calls me a
I've
master
only got a
practitioner.
practitioner's certificate, not a master practitioner certificate like you. Jill, I know you haven't got your camera on, but have you got anything to add to the pot, please?
One of the things that I think is really interesting, and I see a lot of absence of this, particularly amongst some of the younger generation, is the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. I think it's absolutely critical to excellent customer service, but also in a sales or negotiation environment, because if you can understand where the other person is coming from by seeing what's important to them, you're in a better position to actually meet those needs and anticipate those needs. And I think, yeah, second position, being able to, for example, I can't demonstrate this because my camera's misbehaving, but if I was to hold a book up in front of me with the title page towards you, and then turn it round and say, what can I see? If you've got a good perception of what it is to put yourself in my shoes, even if you've forgotten what it actually said on the title page, you can say, well, it was a cookery book and it had pictures of food on it, and you can see the title. Well, you've got a fairly good idea of what I can see. Whereas if people are completely blank, then they're not really understanding where the other person is coming from. And I just think the ability to see things from somebody else's point of view is actually a very simple but really, really important skill.
And absolutely key. And most people don't take the time out. And as things have got so busy and there's more and more emails and people spend less time in building empathy, connecting with people, you're absolutely right.
Just to build on that, Derek, if I may,
Yes,
from
please, Shelley.
what Jill was saying, Fritz Perls influenced NLP.
Remind us who Fritz Perls was.
Well, he founded, along with Paul Goodman, Gestalt psychotherapy. But a lot of Perls's influence is in NLP. And one of the things Perls did very well was in Gestalt, people look at the works of Martin Buber, who talks about the dialogic relationship. And one of the aspects of the dialogic relationship is what Buber called inclusion. And it's standing, to follow on from what was just said, standing in the other person's shoes to understand them without losing yourself. Important distinction.
Absolutely. And that's wow, that's a real skill. You reminded me of standing in the shoes of giants. Tim Durkin, you've studied NLP, but you've also worked and been the number two to Stephen Covey for a while. What's your thinking? What did I miss out?
Well, you didn't miss out on it, but I want to go back to what Shelley said about values, because when you set goals in NLP, one of the criteria that, or a box that needs to be checked is it ethical? Does anybody get hurt by this? And Shelley mentioned, and I want to stress uh, that there's two kinds of values, the espoused values and the lived values. And a whole bunch of people espouse certain values, but live contrary to those values. And I think that's very important in the Stoic philosophies as well, with Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, etc. But is it a value? And I thought our example of authenticity is great. If it's not who you are, that's what Kant said. Immanuel Kant said, grant people the sovereignty to be who they are and not have to impose our values on them. It just doesn't work. And when I became the academic director at SMU's executive education department, the very first instructor I hired talked about values and espoused values versus lived values. And I would say it generated the most robust discussion of any of the other 9 classes that we had that term. It's just fantastic.
So, Tim, you work for and you modeled Stephen Covey. Stephen Covey, for people who don't know, sold 3 million books, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. What was the one thing that you took away from Covey, Tim?
One thing, gosh, I would say seek first to understand and then be understood. That gets to the listening part. One of my favorite recording artists is your guy from Paddington, Seal. And when I bought his best of CD set, which should show you how long ago that was, he said in the liner notes, "I am the luckiest man in the world." I do remember at the time he was married to Heidi Klum, so I thought he was bragging. But he said, "I am the luckiest man in the world because what I write gets heard. The only thing in the world we all really want out of life is to be heard." Because
Wow.
what happens when people aren't heard? They will rise up every single time. So listening, I think, seek first to understand and then be understood. It's the 7 of the 7 habits. That's the one I try the most, and it's a real challenge sometimes, especially when somebody is so diametrically opposed to my values or my beliefs or my opinions. So that's a whole lot of words with a little bit of thought, Derek. I apologize.
Thanks, Tim. Andy Halliday, you were a terrorist police officer. You had to listen to people before you made decisions. What was your one takeaway from that?
Well, it's really interesting listening to what Tim said because if you look at the FBI stairwell, I don't know if anybody's heard of this. Have you heard of it, Derek? The FBI
No.
stairwell. It what you've just told us in 17 minutes is very, very similar to the FBI stairwell. It's a negotiation tool, and of course, it starts with the art of active listening. But going deeper, the emotional, really getting into uh, those habits that show that you are being listened to. So minimal encouragers, eye contact, all these things. It's normally done on a field telephone between a stronghold and a negotiating cell, but it underpins absolutely everything. So whoever is holding hostages or besieged in the flat, they need to be listened to. And that's the very, very first option. And then it really goes through what you've discussed, Derek, around that what that will do is create empathy. Empathy will then lead to rapport. Rapport leads to influence. And then that top level in hostage negotiation, which is behavioral change, which is that the bad guy goes, okay, I'm coming out, I'm giving up. So it just ties really nicely in with what you've spoken to, and I think some coppers over the years, and I must admit I'm probably I've been one of those, haven't listened because we come up against somebody and there's conflict, there's dislike, but you have to listen. You've got to listen to resolve these conflicts. So it ties in quite nicely with the FBI stairwell.
Thanks, Andy. That's very difficult, isn't it? If someone's upset you, threatened you, and the old amygdala's working, and you really wound up, that's real control. Godfrey, you were a private investigator, a banker, recovered money. What's your take on this, or have you got a story for us?
Uh, I've got loads of stories, Derek, but I think coming out of today, there are a lot of common themes, but empathy always rings a bell. You're trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes. What are they thinking? And Andy would, I'm sure, back this up in interview, whether it's an informal interview, an interview under caution. You want to be having some empathy. That's not sympathy. We've got to be very clear the difference between empathy and sympathy, but trying to read the other person's mind. And of course, as an investigator, it is always good to know the answers to the first questions that you put. and you then get a real take on that other person that is the subject of the interview. So, I mean, all this is great stuff. All your speakers, guests on the show, all experts in their own right. It's all good stuff. But if you're just asking me to single out one key point from my experience, it's empathy. It's also very, very useful when you're mapping, trying to find somebody or find stolen or missing assets. If you can understand the motivation, then you are getting towards understanding where the trail goes.
Yeah, I remember that story you told me, and you told us about finding some assets in Romania, but it all went wrong at the last minute, didn't it? You found the assets and then you didn't get your hands on them.
Yeah, well, very quickly, those of you may not have heard this one. I could have retired if we'd got a result on this. And there was a Romanian member of the inner cabinet in government who, with his wife, defrauded the Romanian government of certainly $30 million plus. And they caught him, he was in jail, but the wife escaped and used a number of aliases. And we were appointed by the Société Générale, French bank who owned the Bank of Romania, to recover this money. And there was an international arrest warrant which had failed. Anyway, we found the money had come into the UK via Ireland, and we traced it with a bit of help to an account in Barclays in well, Derek knows where this is in it was Walton-on-Thames in the Weybridge, London area, and we got a freezing order through the court. And Barclays went and put it on the wrong account, and within 24 hours the money had gone again. But we did find some assets. I don't know if I told you that, Derek, but this was all to do with money laundering and hiding the money. And a lot of it had been turned into art and some very expensive artifacts. And we found them in um, in a private house in a gated estate in Weybridge, and we were keeping surveillance on this. And one day we saw a lorry being loaded up with all these artifacts and moved, and we followed it. And the following day, I got a knock on the door in our office, and my PA said, "We've got police down here to see you, Godfrey." And it turned out to be Special Branch. Andy will love this. It was Special Branch, and they came up. We saw their credentials and checked it all out and so on. And they had been keeping surveillance on us, keeping surveillance on these other people, and they thought we were all part of the bad guys. And we had to sort of explain, and they quickly saw that we were the goodies. And cut a long story short, now we were warned off the case because I can say this without disclosing names. There was an MP involved, and the security of our country was at stake. And we were told, you can't pursue this case anymore. It's under our jurisdiction now. And we were warned off, and we lost commission on $30 million, although we'd found it. So we did all the hard work, and we never got any money. And I had to work for about another 10 years after that.
Well, there you go. I'll take anybody's got any questions, anything to add. But I have to say, John Lisby, of course, is an accountant, and we all have our own descriptions of accountants. Not quite as boring as actuaries, John, but John's put in the link. If you have 17 articles of clothing, excluding underwear, you can wear a different outfit every day of a full year. Thanks for that really useful piece of information.
Derek, can I mention one more thing?
Please, Andy.
And that's these phones. Really, really interesting these days. And I would add it to one of your earlier slides that if I'm on a one-to-one on a coaching session with somebody, or I'm negotiating, I don't sell things, but I'm in an environment where there is interaction, human interaction. If somebody walks in and they even just place this on the table in front of them, it sends me a message that says, you are not as important as this. Even if it's switched to silent, it's switched to stun, I am so aware of my phone to a point where when I met Derek before we went to see the Arsenal in St Pancras, I kept my phone in my pocket. I think if you pop your phone on a table, it's a statement that says that's more important. And I think it's something we need to add because it certainly winds me up, and I'm very, very conscious of it.
And seeing you with your three guns, Andy, you're not the sort of guy to be wound up, although no doubt they're back in police custody now.
Hey, Derek, I got a story. When I was single, there was a woman that I really wanted to date, and she finally said yes. And I went out with her, picked her up. We went to a fancy French restaurant. I took out my cell phone and I put it on the table. And she looked at me and she said, "Are you expecting a liver?" And I go, "What?" She goes, "Why do you have your phone out? Are you expecting an organ transplant?" And I go, "No, no." And the second thing is, on a dinner table, there's very few things that carry more germs than a cell phone. So
Wow.
putting it on a eating table or a table that you're eating at during dining, very bad, dangerous. So
I was
anyway,
listening. Yeah, just
yeah,
one point on
yeah.
that. I was listening to a podcast the other week, and the suggestion was because everyone has a phone and most people have it in their bag or whatever, and it might ring, is you get your phone out, Andy won't like this one, and you switch it off in front of the client, and you mention that you've switched it off now, showing that you've cleared the decks and they've got 100% of your attention. Just an idea. It's like one or two of these very small things that make a massive difference.
You can get it all on your phone, on your watch, so
Mhm.
you can hide your phone.
It gets worse, John, doesn't it? It gets worse. Yeah. What I'm going to do now is just close the recording down because we've been going for nearly an hour, and then I'll leave it open. Let's continue the discussions. So thanks for watching this on Monday Night Live. It's been a great pleasure to have a live audience, and I look forward to people watching this on YouTube or listening to this on the Negotiators podcast to send me in your questions and join us live any Monday night. Just send me your email address and I'll put you on my briefing.